The lawyer's hand stopped moving across the page. He looked up from the document slowly, the kind of slow that fills a room with silence before anyone understands why. His eyes moved past my brother, past my mother. They landed on me, and stayed there. My brother leaned forward in his chair. "Is there a problem?" Mr. Caldwell didn't answer him right away. He set the papers down on the desk with a care that felt deliberate, almost ceremonial, and folded his hands on top of them. "I just need a moment," he said quietly. No one in that room except me knew why. I sat with my hands in my lap and said nothing. That was something I had gotten very good at. I grew up in Clover Hill, Virginia, which is the kind of small town that remembers everything and forgives very little. My father built most of his adult life there, 32 years, with the County Water Authority, a house on Birchwood Lane with a vegetable garden in the back that he tended every Saturday morning from April through October, a name that people recognized at the hardware store and the Methodist Church on 5th Street. He died on a Tuesday in February, which felt wrong to me. My father was a man of warm weather. He should have gone in August, maybe, while the tomatoes were coming in and the windows were open. Not in February, not in the gray. I flew in the night they called me. I didn't tell anyone where I'd been before that. I never did. My mother met me at the door of the house on Birchwood Lane. She hugged me briefly, the kind of hug that communicates relief at seeing a body rather than any particular warmth toward the person inside it. Then she stepped back and looked at me the way she always looked at me, a kind of tired assessment, like she was checking a box. "You look thin," she said. "I'm fine, Mom. Your brother's already here. He drove up from Richmond." That was how she said it. Not "your brother is here," but "he drove up from Richmond," the distance noted, the effort recorded. My brother Marcus had a title at a wealth management firm. He had a house in the Fan District with original hardwood floors. He had a wife named Denise who brought homemade lasagna to every family gathering and remembered everyone's birthday. He was, in every way my family measured the word, successful. I had a P.O. box in Northern Virginia and a carry-on bag that I could pack in under 6 minutes. Marcus was in the kitchen when I came in. He nodded at me over his coffee mug. "How long can you stay?" he asked. "As long as I need to." He made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite dismissal, somewhere in the middle. "Still doing the same thing? The government consulting?" "Something like that. You know, Dad used to ask about you," he said. "Wanted to know what you were actually doing." I never had an answer for him. I sat down across from him at the kitchen table where I had done homework and eaten cereal and had approximately 1,000 conversations I'd rather not remember. The table had a scratch near the far corner from when Marcus and I were kids, and he dropped a cast-iron pan trying to prove he was strong enough to carry it. The scratch was still there. My father never sanded it out. "I know he did," I said. "Didn't it bother you? That you couldn't tell him?" I looked at my hands. Outside, the vegetable garden was covered in frost, the bed frames empty, waiting. "Yes," I said. "Every day." The will reading was scheduled for the following Thursday at the office of Caldwell and Associates, which operated out of a converted Victorian on the edge of downtown. Mr. Caldwell had been my father's attorney for over 20 years. He'd helped him set up the trust after my grandmother passed, helped him with the deed when he put the house in both my parents' names. He was a careful man. Methodical, the kind of lawyer who read every line before he signed anything and expected the same from everyone else. My mother, Marcus, and I sat in chairs that had probably heard more family grief than most. The office smelled like old books and radiator heat. There was a framed photograph of a covered bridge on the wall behind the desk, and I stared at it while Mr. Caldwell arranged his papers. Marcus had brought Denise. She sat just behind him with her hands folded in her lap and her face arranged into an expression of appropriate solemnity. My mother had not slept well. I could tell from the way she was holding herself, rigid and upright, the posture of someone managing something. Mr. Caldwell began reading through the standard language. The dates, the declarations, the legal scaffolding that has to come before anything means anything. Marcus interrupted twice with clarifying questions. My mother asked once about the house. I sat quietly. Then my brother said something that I had not expected, even though later I would understand that I should have. He leaned toward Mr. Caldwell and said, "Before we get to the division of assets, I want to make sure we're addressing the question of responsible management. Given the nature of the estate," Mr. Caldwell looked up. "What question is that?" Marcus glanced at me. Our father worked his entire life to build something stable. He was a careful man. I think it's reasonable to ensure the distribution reflects practical considerations. The room was very quiet. Marcus, I said. I'm not trying to be cruel, he said. And I could tell he had rehearsed some version of this because the words came out smoothed over, practiced. But you don't have a mortgage. You don't have a retirement account that any of us can see. You've spent the last 8 years doing something you can't explain to your own family. Dad loved you, but he also worried about you. And I don't think it's unreasonable. That's enough, I said. She's right, my mother said, and for one brief second I thought she was defending me. That's enough preamble, Marcus. Just say what you mean. He straightened in his chair. I think a larger portion of the estate should be directed toward someone who can actually build on it. That's all I'm saying. Someone like you, I said. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. My mother set her hand flat on the arm of her chair. This isn't about sides. This is about what your father would have wanted. He spent his life worried about you, sweetheart. You never called enough. You missed Christmas 3 times in the last 5 years. You show up with that bag like you're passing through, like this family is just a stop on your way to somewhere more important. Her voice didn't break. My mother's voice never broke. Your father deserved better than that. We all did. I looked at the covered bridge in the photograph behind Mr. Caldwell's head. I didn't say anything. Not because I had nothing to say. I had, in fact, quite a lot. I could have told her where I was the Christmas I missed in 2019. I could have told her what the temperature was, and how long I'd gone without sleeping before they pulled me out, and what I'd left unfinished when the call came that my father's health had taken a turn and I needed to come home. I could have told her about the 3 other Christmases, each one what I was doing, and why, and what it cost me. But I had signed papers that said I wouldn't, and even if I hadn't, even if there were no papers, I would not have spent my father's memory in a lawyer's office on Birchwood Lane, justifying myself to people who had already made up their minds. So I sat with my hands in my lap. And I said nothing. Mr. Caldwell had been still for a long moment. He was looking at the document in front of him with an expression I couldn't entirely read, careful. Measuring. He'd turned to a page near the back, the addendum section, and I watched his eyes move across the lines once, then again. Mr. Caldwell, Marcus said, are we ready to proceed? The lawyer didn't answer immediately. He set the pages down. He folded his hands on top of them. I just need a moment, he said. My father had added the addendum 14 months before he died. I did not know about it. He had not told me. That was, I would later understand, exactly the point he wanted to find out on his own, to do something on his own, without asking me to give him permission or explain myself, or lower any wall I'd built out of obligation and clearance and years of practiced silence. He had contacted a retired federal judge he knew through the County Bar Association, a man named Harold Fenn, who had served on the Fourth Circuit for over 2 decades, and whose son had spent 12 years in a career not unlike mine. Judge Fenn had made some calls. He hadn't told my father everything he couldn't, and he wouldn't have, but he'd told him enough. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. Before I read the remainder of the distribution, he said, Your father asked that I read the addendum in full. He was specific about that, he said, and I'm quoting directly from his note to me. He said, Make sure my family hears this before anything else is decided. The rest can wait. Marcus shifted in his seat. What addendum? He added it last January. Mr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses. It's not a change to the distribution of assets. It's a statement. He wrote it himself. My mother's hands were very still in her lap. Mr. Caldwell began to read. My father had not been a man of many words. He wrote the way he built things, no extra material, nothing decorative, just what the structure needed to hold. His note was 2 pages. It took Mr. Caldwell about 6 minutes to read it. He started with the vegetable garden. He wrote that he had spent the better part of 30 years teaching both of his children the same things, that patience matters, that the ground doesn't care how you feel about it, that you have to show up even when there's nothing to show for it yet. He wrote that his son had learned to do this in ways he could see and measure and point to, and that he was proud of that. He wrote that his daughter had learned to do this in ways he could not see and would likely never be permitted to see, and that this had been the great quiet grief of his life, not that she had failed, but that he had not been able to witness what she'd become. He wrote that in January of last year, he had made a phone call, that a man he trusted had told him certain things, That the man had not used specific words or titles or described specific actions, but that what he communicated, in the careful language of people who know how to say things without saying them, was that his daughter had given years of her life to work that the country would likely never formally acknowledge, and that she had done it with a distinction that very few people ever achieve. He wrote that he had sat in his truck in the parking lot of the county water authority for 45 minutes after that phone call. That he had cried, which he noted without apology. That he had called his daughter that evening and talked to her for 20 minutes about nothing in particular, the garden, the weather, a book he was reading because he understood now that he would likely never be able to ask her the real questions, and that this was the shape of the life she had chosen, and he was not going to spend whatever time he had left making her feel guilty for it. He wrote that he wanted his family to understand something before his estate was divided or decided or debated. He wrote, "She was never lost. She was never failing. She was never the thing you worried she was. I spent too many years watching her through the wrong lens, measuring her by standards that were never meant to fit her life, and I am asking your forgiveness for that and hers." He wrote, "Treat her accordingly." The room was very quiet when Mr. Caldwell finished. My mother was looking at the desk, not at me, not at Marcus, not at anything in particular, just the surface of the desk, the edge of the folder, the small brass pen holder that had probably been there for 20 years. Marcus had not moved. I was looking at the covered bridge in the photograph. It was a wooden bridge over a narrow river, the kind they used to build with big timber beams and patience, the kind that lasted 100 years if you maintained it and collapsed in a season if you didn't. My father had a painting of a bridge like that in his study at home. Different bridge, same idea. "She's with the government," Marcus said finally. His voice was flat, not hostile, just processing. That's what the consulting was. "I can't confirm or describe what I do," I said. "That hasn't changed." "But Dad made a call to someone who could tell him certain things without telling him everything. That's different from me telling you." My mother finally looked at me. I had expected something specific from her face, not apology necessarily, not warmth, but some particular feeling I could name. What I saw was harder to categorize. She looked tired and something else. She looked like a woman who had just been asked to rewrite something she'd spent a long time believing. "Christmas," she said. "The 3 years you missed. I can't talk about that. Were you?" She stopped. "Were you safe?" I thought about the question. It was a complicated question when applied to my life in any specific way. "I came home," I said. "Every time." She nodded slowly. It wasn't absolution, and it wasn't the thing either of us might have wanted from the other, but it was honest, which in my family had always been worth more than comfort. Marcus leaned back in his chair and pressed his fingers against his mouth for a moment. He had the look of a man recalculating. Not in a mercenary way. I didn't think that was who my brother was, not at his core. He was a man who organized the world in ledgers, and the ledger he'd been keeping for me had just turned out to be wrong. "I said things," he said. "Today and before today. Over the years." "Yes," I thought. "I know what you thought." He looked at me directly for the first time since we'd sat down. He was 38 years old and he looked, in that moment, younger than that. "I'm sorry, Sarah." My name, from his mouth, with no qualifier attached to it. No frustrated addition, no softening disclaimer, just my name and the weight of meaning it to carry. I had not cried yet. I had not cried since I got the call about my father, not at the house and not at the service and not in the car on any of the drives between places I needed to be. I was not going to start in Mr. Caldwell's office, but I felt something shift and resettle in my chest, the way a house settles in cold weather audible only to the people inside it. "Okay," I said. We walked out of the office into the February afternoon, all 3 of us. My mother slightly ahead with her coat buttoned to the collar and her chin level the way it always was when she was managing something internal. The street was quiet. There was a coffee shop across the way with its lights on, steam on the window. Marcus walked beside me with his hands in his jacket pockets. "The firm I'm at," he said. "We have a consultant. For government clients. He was in the intelligence community for a long time. He never talks about it either." He paused. I always thought it was, I thought it was avoidance. Like he was protecting some image. I didn't understand that it was just the actual rule. "It's just the actual rule," I said. "Yeah," he exhaled. "Yeah," I get that now. My mother had stopped on the sidewalk in front of a bare maple tree. She was looking down the street toward nothing in particular. When I reached her, she turned, and she did something she had not done at the door of the house on Birchwood Lane when I first arrived. She put her arms around me properly, the way she used to when I was small and had fallen, and she was trying to communicate that the ground was temporary and I was not. I stood in it for a moment. "I missed you," she said, very quietly. "All those years I thought I was watching you drift. I was just missing you." I closed my eyes. The thing about silence is that people fill it with whatever they're most afraid of. My family had looked at the outline of my absence for 8 years and filled it with failure, with irresponsibility, with the specific disappointed love of people who thought they were watching someone waste herself. It was not their fault, exactly. They had been given no other material. But my father had gone and found some. And he had left it here, in a folder, in a lawyer's office, for a Thursday morning in February when we all needed it most. Mr. Caldwell caught me alone on the front step as my mother and Marcus walked ahead toward the car. He had my father's letter in a sealed envelope that he handed to me without ceremony. "He wanted you to have the original," he said. "He told me he said you would know what to do with it, that you always knew what to do with things, even when no one else could see you doing it." I held the envelope with both hands. "He also told me," Mr. Caldwell said, and then he stopped and looked at me with the measured expression of a man choosing his words very carefully, "that he was proud of you. Specifically, not in a general way. He said it more than once." I nodded. My throat was doing something I was not going to discuss. "Thank you," I said. "He was a good man." "Yes," I said. "He really was." I stayed in Clover Hill for 11 days, which was the longest I had been there in years. I helped my mother sort through the study. We went through the books and the filing cabinets and the 32 years of receipts and warranties and instruction manuals for appliances that no longer existed. We found a coffee tin in the back of the closet with photographs in it, old ones, the kind with the white border and the date printed in orange on the back. My mother sat on the floor of the study and went through every single one and did not apologize for the time it took. Marcus came back on the weekend and we worked on the vegetable garden together, clearing the frost-killed debris from the beds, getting them ready for whoever would tend them come spring. We didn't talk very much while we worked. We didn't need to. The scratch on the kitchen table, the cast-iron pan, the winter garden. We were two people who had grown up in the same house and drifted in different directions and were now, on our knees in the cold, finding our way back to a common language. Denise brought lasagna on Saturday night. It was the best thing I'd eaten in longer than I could say. And I told her so, and she laughed and told me the secret was to let the bechamel get properly thick before you layer it, which is the kind of specific and practical knowledge I had absolutely zero use for in my actual life, but which I filed away anyway because it felt like something worth keeping. On the 9th day, I sat in my father's study alone in the evening, and I read his letter again. I had read it 3 times already. I read it a 4th time, slowly, and I sat with it for a while in the room where he had spent so many quiet Saturday evenings with a book or a crossword or just the window, the way people do when they're comfortable enough in their own life that they don't need it to be anything other than what it is. He had never told me he'd made that call. He had gone and done something hard and then called me and talked about the weather. He had held what he learned quietly for 14 months, and he'd spent those months, I think, just trying to be present, calling a little more, asking questions he knew I couldn't answer but wanted to ask anyway, making room for me in whatever way he could without requiring me to explain myself first. That was love in its most disciplined form. I did not know that I had it until he was gone, and it was printed on 2 pages in a sealed envelope with my name on the outside. On the last morning, I came downstairs early and found my mother already in the kitchen with the coffee on. She was sitting at the table with her hands around her mug, looking out the window at the backyard, the empty beds, the February sky. She heard me come in and looked up. She didn't say anything for a moment. "How much longer do you think you'll do it?" she asked. "The work? I don't know. Do you want to keep doing it?" I thought about the question honestly. "Yes," I said. "Not because I have to. Because it matters." She nodded slowly. She looked back at the window. "When you come back?" she said, and her voice was careful in the way that careful means. "I mean this exactly. I want you to actually come back, not pass through, not the bag on the porch and the phone always in your hand. Come back." "I will," I said. "I know you can't always tell me things. No, I'm not asking you to. She looked at me again. I'm just asking you to come home sometimes and sit in this kitchen and drink bad coffee with me. That's all. I sat down across from her at the scratch-marked table where we had done every ordinary thing families do in kitchens. She poured me a cup. The coffee was, in fact, bad. She had always made it too strong and then let it sit too long, and my father used to joke that it was her one domestic failure. And she used to pretend to be offended, and this had been a running joke in our house for as long as I could remember. I drank it without saying a word about it. She watched me, and then she made a sound that was almost a laugh. "It's terrible," I said. "I know," she said. "Drink it anyway." I left on a Tuesday, the same day of the week my father had died, though I did not register that until I was already on the highway, heading north with my carry-on in the back seat, and the sealed envelope in my bag and the February sky doing its gray February thing above the Blue Ridge. I thought about my father in the parking lot of the County Water Authority, sitting in his truck for 45 minutes after a phone call he had sought out on his own because he was a man who needed to understand the people he loved, even if they couldn't explain themselves to him. I thought about him calling me that evening and asking about the weather. I thought about 11 days in Clover Hill. The garden beds, the lasagna, the bad coffee, the scratch on the kitchen table. I thought about Marcus on his knees in the cold dirt saying nothing and meaning something. I hadn't left because the work was over. The work was never over, not in any final sense. I had left because 11 days had been enough to do something I hadn't fully done in years, sit still inside my own life, and let it be what it was. Let the people who loved me see some version of me that wasn't just an outline of an absence. My father had taught me, in the vegetable garden on Birchwood Lane, that patience is just presence extended over time. That you show up, and you tend the thing, and eventually it produces what it always had the capacity to produce. You just had to stay long enough to see it. I had been patient in every part of my professional life, and less patient with everything else. He had left me the letter to tell me that. I did not leave that town because I had failed it. I left it because it would be there when I came back. And this time, I intended to